Hey, we've got to talk about spicy lore again. Now, you may remember the legacy of Arathor. It was one of the patches and side stories in the War Within, and in it, the Horde were punching bags, the humans all went insane, and World of Peacecraft kind of reigned supreme. Well, the story of that patch advances in Midnight, and it's sucking in even more beloved characters. And to be clear, this is not some angry culture war thing. I mean, seriously, I feel like so many of our recent videos are smashing together in this one issue, that the modern Horde kinda sucks because they can't have a solid strength and honor story without it actually being about some Alliance character learning their lesson. And remember, we're talking about lifelong enemies, orcs and humans who have killed countless orcs and humans, but who are forced to be friends because your boy Arator needs a new adventure. You know what? Over here in Northern Ireland, I actually think we kind of know something about stories like this. So it's from that perspective that we talk about this, because at the end of the day, we want Blizzard to be able to write really good stories. But it seems to me that some of their biases and perspectives are really getting in the way of their ability to do that. That's all a lot of words. You might be wondering what the hell we're actually talking about. And it's this, or really it's these two people. It's Eitrigg and Danath Trollbane. They're huge characters for either side, and they were commanders at either side of the Arathi warfronts, where, as recently as Battle for Azeroth, Danath was asking us to throw Eitrigg's corpse into Stromgarde's moat. Now though, they're on the same team, so for the Sons of Lothar and many of us, this is just a situation that doesn't make sense. And worse than that, it does betray a lot of Blizzard's greatest storytelling. First up though, we've got to decloud. You see, I'm currently saving thousands of pounds, and you can do the same using today's sponsor, Ugreen. You see, they've got a new NAS that is designed for beginners. It makes it super easy, it's just brilliant. But I want to talk about the numbers first, right? So get a load of this. 12 terabytes of iCloud storage is £54.99 a month. That's $659.88 a year. Forever! Which is well over $3,000 after 5 years, and that's paying for storage that I will never own. So here's what the alternative looks like. You get a Ugreen NAS like this, DH2300. You buy two 6 terabyte drives for about 220 quid, and that's basically it. You've got your storage, and you've paid a third of the yearly price of renting that storage. It's completely insane, and that's without taking into account cloud enshittification and price hikes, like say the price hike that Dropbox pulled on us. I mean, the maths is just embarrassing for the cloud. But here's what actually matters a lot more for most people day to day. That the solution just works, and you get that with Ugreen. You can NFC tap to just connect your phone. Your files sync across every device you've got, your phone, your laptop, whatever. It'll take up to 60 terabytes of storage, and for a clever little twist, the 4K 60Hz HDMI output just turns it into a proper media server, so you can stream your own content with no streaming compression, which is huge for me, no platform restrictions. And they've got AI photo management that'll help you actually find things, so you can search by words and images, faces, and stuff like that. And of course, it's got the NAS stuff. You can set up RAID to protect against drive failures, get proper two-factor security, and UGOS Pro, their software, is dead simple to use. So basically, it's a no-brainer, especially with the Black Friday discount. Just click the link below and stop renting storage that you'll never own. Literally, it's a no-brainer. It pays for itself. Our tale begins with a new feature. Midnight will introduce the Arcantina, an evergreen social hub that'll develop with each expansion. Fairly cool idea, actually. Essentially the ultimate tavern for the heroes of Azeroth to gather in, a quest hub for odds and ends, and the scene, yes, of Midnight's most recent lore controversy. Going there, we find Eitrigg speaking to Darius Crowley. Nothing super strange there, but Eitrigg's history does put him in a unique position. You see, he was arguably the first orc to work with a human, and that's something we'll get into in a minute. Although since then, he's become a top orc in the New Horde and spends most of his time in the Arathi Highlands. Crowley, on the other hand, was key to getting the Worgen into the Alliance. So, these characters are talking, and Eitrigg tells Darius that he's now a member of the Sons of Lothar. If you're a lore nut, you'd be pretty surprised by that. And certainly Darius was surprised by that. That's because the Sons of Lothar, in a fairly major way, were founded to literally kill orcs. They're an organization founded after Anduin Lothar's death by Khadgar, Turalyon, Danath Trollbane, Kurdan Wildhammer, and Illyria Windrunner. Basically, the heroes of Warcraft 2 who crashed through into the Dark Portal to end the threat of orcs once and for all. You see, back then, it was an existential matter, and as explained in our recent Turalyon video, it was some brutal shit. The Sons of Lothar just didn't believe orcs had a place on Azeroth, and at least for Turalyon, that did basically mean that they all had to die. Jumping forward a hell of a lot of time, after Dalaran's destruction, Turalyon then announced that the Sons of Lothar are actually back, and that they are going to go to war with Xal'atath. Now, this new Sons of Lothar is an obviously different organization. It's been over 3 decades since they were formed, and obviously much has happened since. Orcs and humans kind of get along now. But something about putting Eitrigg in the Sons of Lothar does feel a bit strange, because he's an orc who fought humanity in the First War, right? The First War, when they first clashed. He actually fought against Turalyon during the Second War, and then he was hunted like a rat after the war's end. It was some brutal shit. And he's a guy who's faced his inner demons, yes, and maybe he can open his heart up to new things. But there's something about how this is actually going on in-game, how it's actually being told, that doesn't land, that doesn't make these people feel real. Because it feels like they're making an orc who has a vague association with humanity join an alliance organization just to advance the old world of peacecraft angle. That's how it feels when you actually see the dialogue play out. And that means we're once again seeing a Legend of the Horde kinda back into the story, but just to serve an alliance storyline. Again, it keeps happening. But it's not like Eitrigg just says he's a Son of Lothar, and that's that. Oh no, it's actually much worse. They make him go on an adventure with those who historically wanted him dead. And that story could be done well, but we're only talking about it because it isn't. A section of the Midnight Campaign follows Arator as he learns about the Light. It's a scheme that's concocted by Launtius Fowl to basically restore his faith in the Light. Basically, Turalyon and his son Arator get into a fight, and Turalyon in this fight nearly kills his son. Now, it's not because Turalyon suddenly actually wants to kill him, it's because he becomes consumed by something known as light blindness, which can just kind of make him go into a big berserker, Deus Vult berserker rage, basically. That meant he actually went in for a kill shot, but he ended up wounding Arator in the chest. Thankfully, though, he breaks out of it before he is able to land a finishing blow. Now, this all leads to Arator having a bit of a crisis in faith, and Launtius Fowl knows the thing that a paladin would need whenever he is down on his luck, and that is, of course, a quest. So, he calls in the Sons of Lothar to babysit Arator around the world. They visit Light's Hope and Scarlet Monastery, and then they finally go south to Blackrock Mountain. This is a major place because it's where Arator's father, Turalyon, averted disaster in the last moment by downing Orgrim Doomhammer and ending the Old Horde, at least that permutation of it. But what's perhaps more relevant to Midnight's story is, it turns out this is an event that was also fueled by Turalyon falling to light blindness, and basically just going absolute crazy mode on Doomhammer. And if you want to learn about that, you can check out the video that we did on it after you've watched this one. But let's get back to the point with Arator's journey. So, this whole thing leads to him having this quest to reforge the shield that Turalyon used during the Second War. And in the quest, it makes the Dark Horde look like superstitious idiots who basically held on to bits of Turalyon's shield because they just kind of thought it was so extra special. That's a bit weird, and it does feel like just lampooning the Dark Horde as idiot enemies, instead of as the brutal resistance movement that they are, one that was set up by Rend and Main Blackhand. So it undercuts that. It undercuts a part of the essence of the Dark Horde. Now, this whole time, Eitrigg is actually there, and he's coordinating our attack on Blackrock Mountain. And hey, as a scene, come on, it's a big attack in Blackrock Mountain. That's fairly awesome. And him commanding that does actually make sense, because he very much has his own reasons to hate the Blackrock clan. And where it doesn't work is that there is little recognition of Eitrigg's history. There is no recognition of their recent rivalries. Literally, of what happened during Battle for Azeroth, where these characters wanted to throw corpses in castle moats, right? It's kind of crazy. And outside of Eitrigg admitting to Crowley that it is kind of strange, there's no attempt by the writers to explain why he's there. And I don't mean that in a logical sense. I mean that why he himself, the person, the individual who has went through all the actual pain that he's went through, is there. The end of the Second War was actually just the beginning of the true orc story on Azeroth. At this time, Ogrim was in chains and the clans had basically been scattered or destroyed. Rand and Main Blackhand fled with the Blackrock clan over to Blackrock Mountain, where Rand declared himself war chief. But not everyone was on board with this plan. There were fierce battles for the peak, and at the time, Eitrigg was a loyal Horde warrior. He had burnt Stormwind to the ground. He had marched on Khazad-dûm, on Silvermoon, and on Lordaeron. He'd done a lot of stuff. But in Ren's bid for Blackrock Spire, Eitrigg's son died. And with that, he had finally had enough. His homeworld was destroyed. His Horde was no more, and now his son had died in the Blackrock's stubborn refusal to stop fighting an unwinnable war. So he fled Blackrock Mountain. He disappeared into the forests of Lordaeron before they had turned into the Plaguelands, and he became a hermit. Years upon years passed, and then one day, a local noble finds him in this crumbling tower. They end up fighting for hours and basically discover that they're quite evenly matched. But then the tower collapsed on top of the human noble. Now, Eitrigg, being a good orc, knew that it was dishonorable to let this noble, who he had been fighting with, die under the rubble. So he decided to save the human. That human then introduced himself properly as Tyrion Fordring, governor of Hearthglen and member of the Silver Hand. These two then go on to form a bond of blood and honor, which was the title of the novel that all of this stuff happened in. Now, that novel came out a year before Warcraft 3. That's a period of time where Chris Metzen was working out the modern orc story and setting the scene for Thrall's redemption arc. It's quite literally one of the least known but most foundational stories to the Warcraft that we see today. Like, yeah, we meme about World of Peacecraft, but in general, the story has actually been about us working through our differences and defeating the big bad. What matters in getting that right, though, is making it feel good for the characters and the experiences that they will have had internally if you're to actually take the story Blizzard had told seriously. You know, dealing with the characters' trauma, not just moving them to the place the plot needs them like they're just some action figures. And that's exactly what it feels like whenever they're making Eitrigg join the Sons of Lothar in some weird attempt to bring the factions together, even though that story has been told before, and has been told better, and even with the same character. So this is where we're at. In the BFA, Arathi Warfront, Danath Trollbane and Eitrigg face off. They face off as commanders of the Horde and the Alliance. Danath brags about killing countless orcs, and then goes on about killing more orcs. Canonically, the Alliance wins. Danath puts a crown on his head and says that the Highlands now belong to humanity. So it's pretty cut and dry. It's not just, oh, we're going to have a war against our honorable foe. No, it is, we are going to kill the absolute fuck out of those orcs, and especially you. And when we kill you, we're going to throw your body in the moat. That's the vibes of these two characters interacting in the game's recent history. But then something came out, and that thing is called Heartlands. It's a short story, it's off-screen, and with it, the story changes where now Danath is actually a diplomat of the Alliance, and he travels about the place so much that he even appoints his niece Maren as leader of Stromgarde. And this is where the trouble truly begins, because suddenly, Danath went from being the guy who he was in that very recent war to being this nice old guy who just wanted to build bridges, and all of that hatred he had for orcs was suddenly just transplanted onto a new character that Blizzard, I guess, created to carry that burden, called Maren. Now, we saw the conclusion of that story in the Legacy of Arathor question during War Within, and in it, it's all kind of crazy. So Maren has whipped humanity into a frenzy and is blaming the Horde for all of humanity's problems. But she's also actually in league with the rogue element of the Scarlet Crusade and the Alteric Syndicate, where basically this sort of bunch of rogues all get together and hatch a plan to burn Hammerfall to the ground and murder everyone inside. That's the local Horde settlement. That is when we show up, boink Maren for being evil and mean, and then, for some reason, maybe Peacecraft is in the room with me right now, we just let her go. It's weird. And we find a Danath who is totally transformed. And it's as if they're trying to prove how much he doesn't hate orcs by just having him hang out with who we thought was his big enemy, Eitrigg. It's weird. And the real shame is Danath's change does not feel earned here, because they didn't show the change. They just put everything questionable about him into Marin. They made it slop. I guess I'll say this. Look, I assume that you're well-meaning, and you're trying to be in the story that you're crafting here. But it does feel a little bit like there's a kind of a lack of empathy with real-world experience that people would actually have. And if you want a pretty easy TV show recommendation, just go and watch Blue Lights. It's dealing with post-Civil War policing. It has loads of characters who were touched by the very dark goddamn past that this country has had, and by and large does a really good job of actually having those characters be well-drawn people. That's why people care about them, and that's where we get to the problem. In how this story is being told, the likes of Marin, Eitrigg, etc., they don't feel like well-drawn characters. They feel like little action figures being moved around a board with a bunch of logical motivations that don't feel right because we haven't seen the experiential. So, Eitrigg joining the Sons of Lothar this way does not feel earned, because it is referencing Eitrigg's fundamental story of human and orc cooperation, but it's doing so in a way that doesn't actually show us why Eitrigg himself will leave everything he's worked for in the Horde to just go on random adventures with half-elves, humans, and dwarves. It doesn't show him how he internally got over things to get to that point. It betrays the good story it's trying to tell while damaging one of the greatest characters they have. Okay, that's the end of this video, but if you want to go and see how deep this Trollbane thing goes, you gotta check out this video from a few months ago, breaking down the Legacy of Arathor chain. We got a lot of flack for this video when it came out, people saying, oh, this is just a bunch of doomerism, you guys just hate the game. Then they played it, and I could literally see on the YouTube graph the views of that video go boop. As it turned out, yeah, people played it and they agreed. So go watch it next.